Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the companion, the Vasca Kavat. So there was a recent rework to companions and pets, and that's why we've been doing a lot of the pets recently. So we have the top commenter of the last video, Montero U, and the first commenter of the last video, which was the same person, Montero U. He's on a bit of a streak here, guys. We need to stop this man. He is crazy. Getting that weird network not responding thing. Have you guys been getting that, or is it just me? I don't know. We have our recent supporters of Johnny, Eddie, and Lolvile. So thank you for your support, guys. I appreciate it. Okay, let's get into our Vasca here. We have Felinius Maximus, the Vasca Kavat. And before we go into the actual Vasca Kavat build, I just want to go over one mod that is on the claws, because this is going to be important when I explain some of the mods on the actual pet here. So let me go in the claws real quick, and it's going to be Swipe. Swipe is a Kavat specific mod, okay? So you strike 4 additional enemies, and it increases your attack range by 2 meters. So every time your Kavat hits, he's going to be hitting 5 dudes at a time. All right, his attack just goes into basically like an AoE that'll hit 5 dudes. Okay, let me go back to the build here. All right, and before we go over the build, I want to go over the Vasca specific mods. We have Draining Bite and Transfusion. Now, when you do a pet build, you have to pick one of the pet specific mods. If you do not, then you might as well be building a different pet. So I'm showing the Vasca right now, but if I showed the Vasca with not using Transfusion or not using Draining Bite, well, then I might as well be building an Adarza or a Smita at that point. So for the Vasca Kavat to be actually Steel Path viable and to have a niche in the game, you have to be picking one of these two things. So let me explain Transfusion first here. When its master is bleeding out, the Vasca Kavat sacrifices 20% of its health to raise them. So this is going to be a revive on your Warframe when you go down. There's a few things to know about this, is that in arbitrations, there is technically no bleeding state that is coded into arbitrations, and so this won't work on arbitrations. However, this will work on the other pieces of hard content, which is Archon Hunts and Elite Deep Archimedia. I'm pretty sure about Elite Deep Archimedia. I've seen people say that it works. I just have not tested it myself. But on Archon Hunts, it does work, and I'm pretty sure on Elite Deep Archimedia, it also works. Now, those two pieces of content punish you for going down. And so this helps a lot, because if you go down in those pieces of content, and if your teammates are kind of assholes and don't pick you up, then you just lose. You have to redo the whole thing. And so Transfusion will make sure your Vasca picks you up, worst comes to worst. The other thing to know about Transfusion and the revive on it is that there is a similar mod for Sentinels called Sacrifice. The difference, though, is that Transfusion is actually the better version of the two. And it's because the Sentinel's Sacrifice, when that triggers and he goes to self-revive you, he performs some kind of a long interpretive dance over your head for a while before he finally revives you. Whereas Transfusion is instant. So Transfusion is the better option out of the two, although obviously they're for different pets, right? One's for the Vasca Kavat and one is for Sentinels. So they're kind of side grades to each other. Okay, and that's why we're using Transfusion here, because it gives our pet a niche and makes the Vasca actually viable in Steel Path. Now let's explain Draining Bite and why I'm not putting it on the build, because at first I actually had this on the build. So Vasca Kavat inflicts 5 stacks of slash at 150% of its melee damage and restores 10% health to itself. That seems pretty cool. It's 5 stacks of slash, that's nice, and a 10% health restore. That's cool too. Why don't I have it on the build? It's because after I started doing research, I realized it is a 20-second cooldown. Why did you do this, DE? Why did you do this? A 20-second cooldown on 10% health regen? Ugh. So for that reason, it doesn't make it on the build, because it's just not good enough with that crazy cooldown. I don't know what they were thinking with that. So that's just unfortunate. But we do have Transfusion on there at least. So this at least still gives Vasca Kavat a niche in the current game in Steel Path. Specifically, I believe specifically in those two situations, in that Archon Hunt and Elite Deep Archimedia situation. Okay, so let's go over the other mods that we have on this build here. So we're going to start with 2 survivability mods. These are going to be dependent on the Warframe you pick. I am using an Inaros, which is a health and armor Warframe, and so it makes sense for me to use Link Vitality to link my health, and Link Fiber to link my armor. If I was playing a Shield and Adaptation Warframe, I, of course, wouldn't want to link my armor, because I wouldn't be stacking armor in a Shield and Adaptation Warframe, and so instead I would be linking my shields. So it may look like this for a Shield and Adaptation Warframe, where you link your shields and you link your health. The other thing you can consider for a Shield and Adaptation Warframe is not linking health. You still link shields, and then you also do Hastened Deflection, which is going to increase your pet's shield gate potential. So either of those two options are good for a Shield Adaptation Warframe. And then, not all Warframes are health and armor or Shield and Adaptation Warframes. Some Warframes are shield gating Warframes, and shield gating Warframes do not stack health, they do not stack armor, and they do not stack shields. And so in that case, you don't want to be really linking your poor stats. You want to, try to increase his survivability in another way. And you would instead use the regular mods, right? You would use Enhanced Vitality and probably Calculated Redirection here. I guess you could go with the Metal Fiber as well, but you could go with either of those. You would either go Enhanced Vitality, Calculated Redirection for a bigger shield gate, or Metal Fiber for some more damage reduction there. What does that get you up to? 77% damage reduction. So that would be for a shield gating Warframe. So because I'm a health and armor Warframe, though, I'm going to go back to my Link mods here. Okay. In the next slot here, we have Synth Deconstruct. Synth Deconstruct pairs incredibly well with the Warframe mod Equilibrium. And it also pairs okay if your Warframe just needs a little bit of health regen somehow. So, enemies injured by the companion have a 25% chance to drop a health orb when killed. Kavats have a crazy way of injuring multiple dudes, because like I explained before, with Swipe, we're attacking 5 dudes at a time. So that's a lot of potential health orbs produced. So that's a crazy interaction with Equilibrium. And again, if you needed health, that's another way to get a lot of health back. If neither of those two things are true for you, if you don't need health and you're not using Equilibrium, you could take off Synth Deconstruct and use something else in this slot. Okay, and now for the next 2 mods here, I'm going to actually kind of break my rule a bit here. I always say you should use a Retriever mod and Animal Instincts, and I'm going to break my rule a little bit here because the Kavats have so many good mods. They have so many good mods, and you can't fit them all, unfortunately. And also, this specific Kavat, I'm looking at this build as a Archon Hunt and Elite Deep Archimedia focused build, because I believe that's where the Vasca Kavat has its niche. That's where its niche is. And in that specific niche, you're not necessarily resource farming. So, the Retriever mod is not necessarily like super needed. And also, same thing with Primed Animal Instincts. A loot radar is not super needed because you're not resource farming in that case either. So, for this specific pet, we're not using those 2 mods. Instead, we're using Tech Assault. Kavat has a 60% chance to ignore lethal damage and be immune for 4 seconds. So this is a pretty strong ability. Is it absolutely needed? No, you could use a Retriever mod here if you need it. But I just feel like in Elite Deep Archimedia and Archon Hunt, you're not really going to be resource farming. So you might as well use Tech Assault for more survivability on your Vasca Kavat. Okay, let's go over Fear Sense next here. The Kavat senses the weaknesses of enemies within 25 meters, and for 25 seconds, its attacks deal 200% damage and stagger with a 30% chance of knockdown. So this is a pretty powerful mod because of its cooldown. It's a 25-second duration with only a 10-second cooldown. You only have 10 seconds of downtime. So most of the time your Kavat is just dealing an extra 200% damage. There's also a lot of things going around on forums. I cannot confirm this, but there's a lot of things going around on forums that are saying Fear Sense is multiplicative damage. I don't know if that's true or not. 200% multiplicative damage seems like a lot, but we've seen it in some cases in the game. But again, I can't confirm that or not. So we use Fear Sense, again, because we don't really need Primed Animal Instincts on a build that's focused on Archon Hunt and Elite Deep Archimedia. So Tech Assault, Fear Sense. Okay, now in the next slots, we kind of go back to the normal that we do on a lot of builds here. We have Contagious Bond is when your companion kills an enemy afflicted with a status effect. 50% chance of the status effect spreading to other enemies within 9 meters. Kavat's kind of like Kubro's. They spread a crap load of magnetic. Kavat's even spread more magnetic than Kubro's do because of swipe, because every whack that they do is 5 enemies. So Contagious Bond is really good. It helps further spread that magnetic and other procs that we'll get to when we get to the posture. Duplex Bond is next. Companion will clone itself each time you expend 100 energy, up to 3 clones, and clones live 30 seconds and can't use abilities, so they're not going to be using like Transfusion. And their kills have a 50% chance of dropping an energy orb. So this is really powerful. Again, they run around, they're whacking things, they're spreading statuses around, so it's kind of like Contagious Bond where it's a really good spreader. Next here, we have Tenacious Bond. This actually works on Kavats because Kavats have an okay starting critical chance. So Tenacious Bond gives your Warframe 1.2 crit damage multiplier on your weapons as long as your pet, the Vasca Kavat, has a critical chance of over 50%, which we can achieve with the Vasca Kavat with just Bite. Which was not true for Kubro's, except for 2 of them. So 2 out of 5 of the Kubro's were able to use Tenacious Bond. The other 3 were not because they didn't have a high enough base critical. Transfusion we already went over. And Fetch, obviously this is just it's kind of like Vacuum except for companions. It just kind of scoops your loot up. You still need this because this also scoops up your energy orbs, health orbs, things like that. So it's not just for loot farming. You always want Fetch on. Okay, and before we end the build for the Kavat here, I want to go over some other Kavat mods because there is actually a lot of them. Okay, so we have Tech Enhance. Let's go over Tech Enhance first, and I'll just explain why we don't have it on the build, but it's still pretty decent. So Tech Enhance is a 30% Kavat ability duration increase. The only thing on our thing right now that has a duration is Fear Sense. And 30%, I mean, that would still give it like plus 8 seconds. So instead of 25-second duration, it would be a, what is that, like 33% duration. It's still going to have the 10-second cooldown, though. And the 10-second cooldown is pretty short. So for that reason, I don't feel like you need Tech Enhance with Fear Sense. But it's still decent. You know, it's okay. Pounce. This is interesting because there's an interaction with Swipe that we're going to have on the claws and Pounce. So if you read Pounce here, the Kavat pounces at an enemy, dealing 90% damage and stunning them for a short duration. So this only, hits one dude, but when you combine it with Swipe, if you remember, Swipe increases the range of your Kavat by 2 meters. So it actually turns Pounce into kind of like a little AoE ability. And if I think on testing, I can't remember 100%, but I believe on testing, it also produces the procs. So like your magnetic procs and things like that. Now it doesn't make it on the build because the Kavat by himself, just with Swipe whacking 5 dudes at a time, spreads stuff like crazy. So there's really no reason to like spend a mod slot on Pounce, but it's still pretty decent. It's still pretty decent there. It's kind of like Tech Enhance. Tech Enhance is good. Pounce is good. They're just not good enough to make it on the build. Sharpened Claws is an interesting one, and it may be misinterpreted, so I'll try to explain this here. A vicious attack dealing 300% damage that sunders armor by 120% and rends flesh. So this is a full armor strip that your Kavat will do. The reason we don't use it is because it happens somewhat often. It's not on a super short cooldown, but it's short enough. It's okay. It's just that it does not interact with Swipe. You know how Swipe hits 5 dudes when he attacks? This is going to remain at only the main target. Only the main target is actually going to be the one that's affected. And it also doesn't work on the clones. So the Duplex Bond clones also won't be taking this into consideration. So it's only the main Vasca Kavat that's armor stripping once in a while. This could be good. It could be good on maps where you're going against like heavily armored enemies, which, you know, could be Archon Hunt, could be Elite Deep Archimedia. So you could consider maybe Sharpened Claws over Tech Assault or Fear Sense. But it's questionable. It's not as good as you would think because it doesn't interact with Swipe, unfortunately. But it's still decent. You know, it's like these other two that are decent. They're really close to being on the build. And you could probably make room for these on the build too if you wanted to take these off here. And then lastly here we have Territorial Aggression. This one I don't believe is very good. The Kavat stalks their territory in a radius of 6 meters for 15 seconds, and each second enemies within this area have a 30% chance of being attacked by a Shadow Kavat. This is an interesting one, but I feel like it's more roleplay than it is good. So yeah, we're not using this one here. But these three are almost good enough to make it on the build, and you could probably clear one of these two off to fit one of them if you really wanted to. All right, so that is the Vasca Kavat build here. And let's go over the Vasca Claws next. All right, we're going to start with the posture. And you have two options. So on the Kubros, if you remember, we went with Assassin Posture on like every single one of them. And Assassin Posture is the companion will prioritize Eximus and high-ranking enemies, and it gives them 300% overguard damage. So the reason we go with Assassin Posture on the Kubros, and you could go with it on the Kavats as well, is because the Kubros and the Kavats, they have this interaction here, Bellringer and Magnetic Strike, where they produce a crap load of magnetic procs. And having your pet specifically seek out those enemies that the magnetic procs do the most on makes sense, and that's why we use Assassin Posture. But let me try to play devil's advocate and explain why I think Protector Posture is possibly either better or just as good as Assassin. You could probably use either one, but let me try to explain why I think Protector Posture is pretty decent. So the companion will prioritize attacking enemies within 15 meters of the Warframe. So he still attacks like normal. It's just with it, he prioritizes close enemies. And attacks inflict +4 puncture procs. +4 puncture procs is 20% final critical. So that'll be 20% final critical for you, for your pet, whatever. That's pretty decent, especially since he's attacking 5 dudes at a time because of Swipe, and he has his clones spreading it. So there's going to be a crap load of dudes that just have these little +4 puncture procs all over the place, which are little 20% final critical buffs. That's pretty good. You know, he's still producing a crap load of magnetic too, and because the Kavats, like, they spread even quicker than the Kubros do, I feel like eventually the Eximus are going to get attacked, and they're just naturally going to get those magnetic procs anyway. But if you wanted to guarantee that the Eximuses were the first dudes that got those magnetic procs, you could use Assassin Posture instead. So that's why I believe both of these are kind of fighting for this spot here. You know, you either go Assassin Posture for the consistent magnetic procking on those Eximuses, or you go with Protector Posture for like 20% final critical on like everything, because your guys are going to be throwing these little puncture procs on everything. So choose what you like there. Both are really good. I'm going to stick with Protector Posture myself. Okay, next we have Bite, which is going to be 330% crit chance and 220% crit damage. Let me just double check here. I think without Bite, yeah. So without Bite, he does not activate Tenacious Bond. He has to have over 50% critical chance. So you need Bite to activate Tenacious Bond. So this is a must. Next we have Maul, is 330% melee damage. Next we have Precise Conditioning, which is 385% melee damage, and it converts all base physical damage to slash damage. Then we have Burning Claws, which is 330% heat, 330% status chance, and converts all elemental damage from these claws to heat damage. So I'll explain why I think slash and heat are the best options. But you know, there's other things you could pick as well. So with heat here, he's producing magnetic. Magnetic provides more damage to those overguarded enemies. Most of those overguarded enemies are going to be the ones with armor. Not all of them. Of course, there's going to be like some corpus mixed in too. but most of those overguarded enemies are going to have armor, and heat is a partial armor strip, which is going to further weaken them. So he's going to have the weakening of magnetic, and he's going to have the weakening of heat. I think Burning Claws is an absolute must if you choose Assassin posture, because then he's specifically going out for those Eximus dudes. If you go Protector posture like I am, you could consider things like Shocking Claws. Shocking Claws actually starts becoming pretty decent if you have Protector posture, because it's just an AoE dot. It's just a good AoE dot that happens. So either Shocking Claws or Burning Claws. Burning Claws definitely if you're going Assassin posture. Okay, and then we have Precision Conditioning. I'm going to explain why I think Precision Conditioning is the best option here. So if we look, he's going to produce about 1 status per hit, and most of the time it's going to be heat. It's only a very small chance for it to produce the physical element. So if we were going to produce one physical element, what physical element would be the most impactful? So first we look at the disabling conditioning with Puncture. Well, what does 1 Puncture do? 1 Puncture is 5% final critical. If you choose to go Protector posture, you're already basically going to be maxing out your puncture stack. So you definitely don't want to go disabling conditioning if you're going Protector posture. And I think even if you went Assassin posture, like 1 puncture proc with 5% final critical is not that impactful. Brute conditioning. 1 impact proc. What does 1 impact proc do? This one is okay because 1 impact proc actually will turn into 1 magnetic proc, which is pretty decent. It's just that because your dude spreads these magnetics so quickly, I feel like you're probably going to be maxing out your magnetic. Like he's already producing 4 at a time every time he hits, and he's hitting 5 dudes at a time. So I feel like you're going to be maxing out your 10 stacks of magnetic pretty quickly. And so a lot of times this 1 impact proc turning into a magnetic might not even, you might be at that 10 stacks already. But there probably is a case to be made for this to be pretty decent too. And then we go over precision conditioning, the one I'm picking. Well, what does 1 slash proc do? 1 slash proc, depending on the damage of the weapon, depends on the damage of the dot. So a little weapon's going to do this little tiny dot that doesn't do much damage, and a big weapon's going to do a dot that does pretty decent damage. This one here has got about 4,000 damage, of course, not with like critical multipliers taken into effect. So it's pretty decent. It's not as like big as the Kubros, but it's still pretty decent. And so I think the 1 slash is going to be the most meaningful, but there probably is a case to be made that maybe the 1 impact turning into a magnetic is also the most meaningful. So you could either go with precision conditioning or brute conditioning here. Okay, let's continue on with the bottom row here. So we have Hunter Synergy. Hunter Synergy is 30% primary weapon's critical chance is added to your companion. I have a very middle of the ground weapon with the Grakata on right now, which is like pretty like average for crit chance. And with an average weapon with crit chance, I'm looking at an 87% critical chance here. Now this will change, you know, if you're using a weapon that's very high in crit, like let's say the Dread, it's going to be way more than 87%. Or if you're using a weapon that's really low in crit, like the Sporithrex, it's going to be a lot lower than 87%. But with an average weapon, it's worth putting on the Vasca Claws here. You also have the added effect at the bottom, plus 25% companion damage on enemies affected by slash. Most of the weapons you're going to be building out for your Warframe are going to be slash heavy. Not all of them, but most of them are. And so it combos well with the Hunter Synergy here. Okay, Swipe. Swipe is a must. Swipe is absolutely nuts. Now, if you were watching the Kubro builds, we used the Mecha mod in this slot. Well, the cool thing that we don't really have, well, it's kind of cool and it's kind of not. The cool thing is that Kavats can't use the mecha mods, and so this slot is empty anyway, and so we could easily just put Swipe here, and we don't have to like think about it too much. We don't have to consider, well, is Swipe better than the mecha mods? Because mecha doesn't happen for the Kavats. So we just put Swipe where the mecha mod used to be. And then we have the 1-2 punch for companions, which is going to be Bell Ringer and Magnetic Strike. So Bell Ringer is going to apply 4 impact status effects on a hit. And those 4 impact status effects, because of Magnetic Strike, are going to turn into magnetic procs. So that is the Vasca Claws. That's how you build them out there. And that is the Vasca Kavat, and how you build out the little Vasca here. I feel like the Vasca Kavat is probably one of the weaker companions in the game, I feel like the niche that it provides is maybe a little bit too niche. Because as a better player, and if you're a like average to above average player, you're not really going to be going down in Archon hunts and Elite Deep Archimedia like that. I know it's like top content-ish for a lot of people, but for an average or above average player, it's not really. It's still pretty easy content. And so like I'm personally not going to be looking to try to like use transfusion to get myself up in that, you know. But for maybe a newer player, if you're just getting into Elite Deep Archimedia, Archon hunts, things like that, this could be a good pet for you because it does provide this niche of reviving you. So, I also used Vasca Kavat for a long time on Titania because if you go down in Pixie form, it just like insta revives you, which is really nice. I've switched recently. I don't use it on Titania anymore, but I used to use it a lot on Titania. So yeah, that's the Vasca Kavat. It's a good pet. It still provides a niche in Steel Path. I just feel like that niche may be too niche at this point. So I don't think there's any gameplay that's really required for me to show you how transfusion works. It just picks you up immediately when you go down. So yeah, I think we'll end it here, and I'll start working on the next Kavat build there. So if you guys like the video, consider giving it a like. If you haven't subbed yet, consider subbing or tell me what I can do to earn your sub. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right.